Perfect. So it's just 1 minute past 10 there. So I think we can kick off Steve there with the slide.
Yep.
So we'll just start off everyone with a bit of housekeeping. So we will be recording this webinar and it will be distributed later on. So if you do have any questions, you can use the chat panel or the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So of course, ask questions throughout if you want, or you can keep them till the end. We'll answer them all. Everyone has cameras off and are on mute. So if you need anything at all, raise your hand or just send us a message throughout the chat panel. So we've got Sicon for Sage 200 today is our webinar. And my name is Hannah. I'm sure you all know me at this stage, Sales Account Manager with Envisage. And we are joined by Steve Gemmett of Sicon. He is the Sales and Marketing Director.
Morning. Thanks, everybody.
So just a quick run through our agenda this morning. We're going to do a quick introduction, the Sicon solutions. Steve will then take you through a demo, the end-to-end process. Then we'll run through the benefits, and then we will do our Q&A session. Perfect. So I'm just going to turn my camera off now for the purpose of the demonstration. I am here, of course, if there is any questions, and I will pass over to Steve.
Perfect. Thanks, Hannah. I too will turn off my camera. Nobody really wants to nobody wants to see me and my concentration face, I think, Hannah, as you when we were talking earlier. But thank you, everybody, for joining. As I said, my name's Steve Gemmett. I'm the Sales and Marketing Director at Sicon, and I'm well, you're in my hands now for the next sort of just under an hour. So in terms of Sicon, for those of you who perhaps haven't heard of us before, I'm just going to kind of minimize the presentation there. And I'm actually going to start with our website. So we are classified, as you can just see in the top right hand corner, by Sage as a Sage Tech Partner Plus. Essentially, we're a developer partner of Sage. Now, we only develop for Sage 200, something which we've done in excess of 20 years now. And we've probably got one of the largest portfolios. We've got, when I've counted them, 38 individual products. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all of those today. But we exist because we enhance your Sage 200 solution. So whether it's verticals such as construction, manufacturing, that sort of thing, or as we're going to run through today, perhaps more on the finance side, approval, so devolving responsibility to your end users, but still maintaining control. We don't sell direct, we sell through our partner community, with Hannah and the team at Envisage being a long-standing strategic partner of Sicon's. So what does that mean for you? Well, we're the third point in that triangle. So yourselves, Envisage, and ourselves, underpinned by Sage. So your main contact would be Hannah and the team, but we're always there to support. Maybe it's a second line, maybe even handling some of the implementation sometimes. Now, as with Sage 200, Sage 200 is what we classify as off the shelf. So it's highly configurable, but it's within the design framework, means it's more palatable from a cost perspective and it's quicker to deploy. We're exactly the same. So every customer will be on the same code set, but the products do move forwards and we're listening to ideas to help enhance it. So in terms of what we're going to run through today, well, there's actually 3 elements. The one I'm going to say for the end is audit log. So what audit log does is we track fields within the system that Sage do not. So for example, as I'll run through today, changing the bank account details on a purchase ledger. So giving you that peace of mind that your users can carry on doing what they need to do, but we're just tracking those changes from that audit perspective. Inside of Sage 200, we're going to look briefly at Sicon documents and document automation. So documents is attaching, typically it would be purchase invoices against the transaction in Sage, so you can do away with paper and being able to be able to find that document easily, but you can store documents against the purchase ledger, sales ledger, accounts as well. Automation sits on top of that, and it's very much OCR tends to be the terminology used. So being able to email or drag and drop an invoice in, the system read it, train how to do that, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through, but then being able to process that through with minimal intervention. And then where we're going to start today is with Sicon Approval. So this is that web portal that wraps around your Sage 200 solution. It's modular, so you purchase the relevant modules, and it has its own named user licenses. So I don't have to be a Sage 200 user, and that's really key. You probably don't want someone like myself accessing your Sage system. Now, We're not going to go through all the modules. The key ones today, we're going to cover probably the two most popular, which would be requisitions and invoice approvals. If I do have a little bit of time, I'm not sure I will, we can touch on expenses, but you should get an idea of what it's doing. So the idea with requisitions is that's pre-purchase order. So I'm going to request to buy some products that we've got in our stock system today, but I'll talk about some of the other nuances. That's going to go through an approval route, create a purchase order in Sage. I'm going to goods receive that because I've got three-way matching switched on. You're then going to see the document automation as I process through the purchase invoice to match that. That's then going to come out to our invoice approvals. So that's purchase invoice approvals. Again, we'll talk about some of the elements within there. That's going to update Sage, ready for us to pay. That's the theory and principle. We're going to do a live demo. There's always a risk with a live demo, but hopefully you're in safe hands. And as Hannah said, if you have got any questions, please do ask them as we go through. So this is Sicon Approvals. Now, it's a web page. It is installed in the same environment as your Sage system. So you are in control, and very much training where we would deliver it is a train the trainer. So giving you the skills to be able to create new users, create your own approval routes. And again, we'll talk about the different options there. As I mentioned, we have our own user record, user licenses. So I'm going to log in as a user called Sandra first off. Now, Sandra's an employee. She's going to raise a requisition. But as Sandra logs in, now, personally, I use this in Safari, Chrome, or Edge on my iPad. It works obviously on PCs as well. Two ways of deploying it. Could be either be inside of your network, or as most of our customers do, apologies, it's about as technical as I get. You poke a little hole in the firewall, sit it behind an SSL certificate, and you can then access it anywhere you've got an internet connection. And there is a mobile app as well, which we won't be covering today, but as long as you've got a login and it's configured correctly, then they can download the app, and that's iOS or Android. But we are working on a slightly different way to deploy that. That's something that hopefully we'll be launching next year. Right, menu down the left-hand side, we've got our dashboard area, and you'll see some tiles. When we log in as Corey, who's going to approve it, we'll see those tiles appear. We do have things like, from a user settings perspective, being able to log in. I can turn on an out of office. So this is great for your approvers. So the problem we've got is we're going to use technology. So we're not going to have to send emails. We're not going to have to print it and leave it on the desk of whoever needs to approve it. We're going to use technology. The problem with that is if people are out of the office, either ill or they're on holiday or might even be away for meetings, you don't want it sat there. So we've got this concept of an out of office. You set up an alternate user against that person. And in this instance, Sandra could, if she was an approver, could pick any of those users. And that person would be would receive those notifications to then approve those activities on Sandra's behalf. Upon Sandra's return, she can simply switch it off. We also have functionality like delegate functionality, where you can assign a list of other approvals users for somebody, and if they select them, they then log in as that person without needing their password, so they could approve or they could turn on the out of office. They can't stitch up that person because it would say Steve Gemmett has approved on behalf of Sandra. And then lastly, for those of you who like your light or dark themes, we've even built that in there. Not really my bag, but certainly you can do that. Okay, so we're going to focus on requisitions. Now, the menu down the left-hand side, you'll only see the modules that you've purchased, which is a good thing. You're not going to have somebody saying, why can't I click on expenses if you haven't got that? Likewise, they'll only see the functionality that you make available for their user type. Now, from a requisition perspective, I'm going to go with, I know who I want to buy it from, and I know the items, but we do have, for those of you perhaps have a procurement type process, or you've got users who say, look, I just want a laptop, I don't really care where we buy it from, then we have what we call a project requisition, where I can just enter the details of what I need to buy without stock or free text. I don't have to pick a supplier, I don't even have to enter a price. That can then go to, you build an approval route, that can go to typically somebody in purchasing. They'll pick the best supplier, they'll enter the price, pick the relevant nominal, and then once they approve it, it will split into the appropriate number of requisitions to go down those approval routes, which we'll talk about shortly, and then you end up with purchase orders in Sage. If you're not going to use that process, you can switch that off. So click on Create New Requisition. Now, in terms of how this connects, yes, it wraps around Sage 200, but it's looking and talking to your Sage companies in real time. And actually, that's a key thing here is Sage companies. So for those of you who've got multiple Sage companies within your system, it will wrap around all of those. There's no extra cost other than maybe users for those other companies and time to help you set it up. But there's a couple of scenarios. So you could have, as we've got here, where Sandra actually she works for a couple of those trading entities. And so she would pick the company that she wants to raise the requisition for, pick the supplier, and then enter the details. Alternatively, and probably in the real world, normally Sandra would be locked to one company, but it's your approvers, it's your managing director, your commercial director, whoever, they are in approval routes across multiple companies, absolutely fine. They will receive them all within the same system and then being able to approve those. And of course, the transactions are updating in the relevant company. This list of suppliers is coming from my live Sage 200 company, that's my Steve Gemmett company. If we were to add a new supplier in Sage, then they would appear in here next time I logged in. So there's no duplicate of data. Likewise, when we're reading stock, we're reading nominal as well. And actually, there's a function down here in the Sage admin area where we can build an approval route to request working with a new supplier, request working with a new customer and stock items as well. So that can go down the approval route. So hopefully you've started to build. There's a lot of functionality. We're not going to cover it all today. Now, I'm going to pick Ernie Swinton. That's the supplier that I want to work with today. And again, from your Sage system, the supplier's details, default contact details have all been pulled through from Sage. I've got a number of options with delivery addresses. So you can set up a list of them and default one to a user within approvals. Could pick a supplier and say, I'm going to pick it up from the supplier. We've got some customers where they'll ship parts straight to their end users. So we could pick a sales ledger account. I'm using Sicon projects, so I could pick a project address. Approvals does work with Sage Project Accounting for those of you perhaps using that as well. If you're not using a projects module, then of course that option is disabled, and I could enter a free text address as well. Now I'm going to use stock items today. So as I click on stock, again, this is going to read my stock record, and I'm just going to search. And the first things first, I'm going to add some of my good old espresso machines. I want one of those today. What it's doing there, it's pulling through the buying unit, it's pulling through the buying price for me, as well as pulling through the nominal that's set up against the stock item. And I could pick a project if I wanted to. I'm going to add a couple more lines. So we will go for our espresso cups. Now, it is a smart search as well, so I don't have to necessarily know the code. It will also, so if I started typing in machine, it would bring anything back where it's looking for the name machine as well. So we're going to go for some cups. We'll go for 3 cups today. So again, in terms of the pricing for those cups, I'm going to overwrite those. They're pretty expensive cups actually. And then lastly, we'll go for our kettle. Again, ignore that. That's just we've got an enhancement pack where you can do pop-up notes. So that's where again we sort of join those two up. So let's go for 1 kettle. And I'm just going to overwrite the price. So again, what I'm showing you there is, depending on the options, I can either take the price that's in there, or perhaps I've been quoted a different price and I can overwrite that. So in terms of what I've done, there's my order that we can now see on the screen. So I've got my single espresso machine, 3 cups, and I've got my 2. Well, actually, I've got 1 kettle there. I want 2 kettles. Let me just edit that and add a second kettle in there as well. It makes sense why I'm being quite specific with the quantities shortly. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm just adding and it's drawing the information across. That could be free text. If you don't use stock, you can switch that element off. I could add comment lines, charge lines as well. A couple of other features that I've got. We do have this option to be able to flag that it's urgent. Now I tend to put this in, it just is. Obviously that's not a valid reason for it being urgent, but this does have an important function. So within the system, you can control the frequency of email notifications. So what's going to happen is, as soon as I submit this requisition, an email will be sent to the approver or approvers, depending on how you've got it configured, with a link in. They can't approve it from the email, but they can click on the link and it would take them to the website to log in. Now, perhaps at an operational level, you want that to be sent every hour. But as you move up the chain, because you might be getting lots of those emails, just group all of the activity into one email a day. So we can set that up in the background. You can also, though, configure it that if it's urgent, it will overwrite those rules and it will send it hourly with hourly sort of reminders. Obviously, in terms of ticking the box, we can't control that. That's part of your process. But again, it's a feature that you can make use of. Likewise, from a justification perspective, we can have some notes here: need for a tea party, coffee party in this example. But those are kind of your internal justification, even down to putting attachments on there as well, which is great. We've got this option, which I've got enabled at the moment, but you can switch it off, whereby you can set, based on value, the number of attachments they must link to this requisition. So what do I mean by that? So anything, say, less than £500, we need one attachment. 500 to 5,000, we want 2 attachments, and over 5,000, we want 3. So perhaps your process is they must get a certain number of quotes before submitting a requisition. You can control those attachments. We've also got, as we'll see as we go through an approval history, and then there's an audit log of those changes that I've made. I could copy a previously approved order. I can actually print the quote request from within here as well and email that to multiple suppliers to get their best price. Save only or sit as a draft, or save and submit is going to go out for approval. Now, for me, this is where the real power and the strength of this solution comes into its own, is the flexibility of those approval routes. Now, there has to be some logic. I'm going to slightly exaggerate, but it's based on a real life conversation. Obviously, I mean, I remember with one site, I said, how do you choose who you're going to give it to? And it wasn't quite as fresh as this, but it was somewhere similar, where they went, well, if it's a Tuesday, it's a half moon, and I had Kellogg Crunchy Nuts for breakfast, then I'll send it to Bob. But if I had porridge, then I'll send it through to Hannah. Obviously, it wasn't quite like that, but there was no logic. They just picked at random who they thought they should send it to. So you do need some logic, but there is a lot of flexibility. So most popular would be based on nominal. So perhaps grouping the cost center alongside that nominal. And then, so anything for our sales cost center nominals would go through to Hannah. Anything for operational would go through to Ryan. That can be multi-level, so we could give Hannah an approval limit. So Hannah's is £1,000. If it's less than that, then when she approves it, it will update and post through to Sage. But if it's over that, it would still go through to Hannah, but then it would go through the next person, so on and so on. We can do it based on supplier. So everything for supplier A goes down this route, everything for supplier B goes down a different route. We could do it purely on value. Anything less than £5,000 goes down that route, anything over, different route. We can even do it based on requesting user, or for those of you using projects, then you can do it by project. And if you're using Sicon projects, we can even do it by project manager. One last option is, if you use nominal budgets in Sage, the system can compare transactions in Sage to your monthly, your year-to-date, or your annual budget. And then if it sees that you're over budget, you can configure it so that it might be 50p, but because you're over budget, it's also then going to include the commercial director at the end of the approval route because you're over budget. And actually, we've got a client where if it's over £250,000, then or it's over budget, it goes to 5 board members, and so long as any 2 of those approve it, then the system's happy. So lots of flexibility. My recommendation is always keep it simple, because you've obviously got to maintain those, and you could end up with lots and lots of permutations. So Sandra submitted that. Now, in terms of my demo environment, Corey's my main approver. So Corey will have received an email to log in, and we can see here he's got 7 requisitions that he needs to approve. And as we log in, you can see there's a number of ones from different companies. Just at the top there is the one that I've submitted today. So in terms of, sorry, there's the one I've submitted today at the bottom there. Sorry, I got it in the wrong order. Now they've got a number of flags. So as I go through, we can see it's over budget, and that's why it's highlighted in this sort of peachy color. We can see marked it as urgent. There's my note of justification. And we can also see the lines. Now, this is important because actually, depending on how you've got it configured, it's wholly possible for a single requisition to go out to multiple people at the same time. It's only once it's been fully approved will we get a PO in our Sage company. So we can see the 3 lines, we can see the values, the total value. If I had attachments, I'd see those in there. I can see my notes. There's my budgets, which I will touch on when we get to the invoice approval side. And we can see the approval history. So we can see Sandra Markey started it. We can see the start date. If it's approved, rejected, we'll see all of those details. Now, from Corey's perspective, he's got a number of options. He can approve or reject individual lines or the whole thing. So if he rejects, then he has to put a reason in why he's rejecting it, and that would then go back to Sandra. Now, might be one of 2 scenarios. So it may well be that we're not happy with the price of the espresso machines to see if you can get a better price. Sandra could overwrite the price, resubmit it. If the other 2 lines were approved, they essentially pause. When everything catches up, it carries on. Or actually, you've already got a coffee machine. You only bought one 6 months ago, so carry on using that. In which case, Sandra could delete that line from the requisition, resubmit it. It would jump and catch up with the rest of it and then carry on its way. I'm actually just today, for simplicity, I'm just going to approve all. What you'll also notice is we have these tick boxes. So actually, if I'm happy with all of that, I could just tick on the flag at the top and then approve all of those. So again, different ways. But the most important part so far from a finance team perspective, the back office, we haven't had to touch anything. What we're doing is we're giving the flexibility to the end users to be able to make those requests, but we're maintaining control through the approval routes. Now, at all stages, Sandra will receive an email to say it's been approved by Corey, it's now gone to the next person and so on, until such time as she receives notification to say it's been fully approved. And Sandra logs in, we go to approved. We should see, there it is at the top, and 4180, I now go into Sage and I look at my purchase order list. I just refresh that. There's our purchase order 4180. Now, if I go in and just have a quick look at that purchase order, again, we can see there's the 3 lines on there. And in terms of across the top, there's an approvals order. We can actually see the details from approval. So we've got the unique ID. So if I want to see that and find it in approvals, I can just search for that unique ID. I could search for the PO number as well, but I can see who it's requested for as well. Okay. Now at this stage, there's a couple of options. We could allow Sandra to print the summary. She can actually email it from within the system with a PDF attachment and send that out. There is a setting, I'm not a big fan, and I'll explain why, but there is a setting whereby the moment it's fully approved and it hits approvals, it will just automatically email the supplier. Some people love that. Me, I don't know, perhaps I'm a control freak, but I personally prefer to send it when I'm ready, but there are those sort of options that we've built in. The other option, however, I mentioned about Sicon documents, where it's about attaching sort of purchase invoices, and we'll see that shortly. But there is a feature within there, which is what we call document distribution. And that's included with the scan and view user license. And the idea there is being able to email and archive documents out the system. So actually, if your process is we want to send them, so we just keep an eye, and perhaps you've got a filter up here just for your live orders maybe. So you see them come in. What you can do is if I go to print orders, we then have an option where, and I'm just going to pick a single order, but obviously you can do multiple. But if I do this here, display, we have an option from the system where if you click the email and archive button, that's our button on this form, that then's going to trigger. And in the background of the system, what I've got set up, so I've got this admin access, let me just do that for a second, whereby from within the system, you can then configure it so it's going to email out from within Sage with a HTML background. It's going to pick up the contact name. There's the purchase order number. But we can do things like we can add a header page, put a background on it. Ignore my my artwork there. You hopefully get the idea. And attach terms and conditions. And there's things like criteria. So if it's a foreign account, then you could have different terms of conditions based on perhaps the country code, but within there. But what we've also done is against the espresso stock item, I've attached a product image, and I've said, well, when we send a purchase order out, attach that image so they know the specific model that we want. But you can do that. So I've got it set up for my sales orders where if I send and I dispatch it, I've also got a specification. And again, what I'm throwing ideas at you, you don't have to do all of this, but just trying to give you an idea of the art of the possible here, where again, you're in control because you're sending the purchase orders out, but you've got this, using the technology there just to simplify your life. By the way, I've got this set to come to drafts, so I can show you there. It could just automatically send it out. And there is an option where it can use your email footer, should you wish. So with that done, the next stage, because I've got three-way matching switched on, is to goods received. Now, there's a couple of options for this. The first one is we can enable Sandra, if it's set up correctly, to be able to goods receive her own purchase orders if we wish. We don't have to. Let's just see. I don't know if I've got that set up in here. No, I don't. But we could allow Sandra to goods receive. Actually, I think she may well do. Let me just pick the right company here. Let's just check. Go over another page. No, Sandra doesn't have permission at the moment, but we could do that. Alternatively, if you've got something like Sicon barcoding, then you could use that. But I'm actually just going to confirm goods receipt inside of the system here. Now, actually, before I do that, I'm just going to come away from this and I'm going to move back into documents. So the reason I had to be so specific with the numbers is I'd emailed up an invoice previously with regards to that particular invoice, and we can see there for Ernie Swinton. So just to make it flow. Now, the idea here is, in terms of your manual process, it might come in on an email, you'll probably print it out, then you'll go on to say, well, some people actually will get them signed off before they put them on Sage, or you might put it on Sage, you might put it into query, but you're sat, you pick the supplier, you enter the invoice number, you're entering the values, etc., before posting it through. Well, the document automation, what this does is this negates that admin for having to type it in. Now, it's not, if anybody says, oh, you'll never have to touch a purchase invoice again, in my opinion, I think they need to rethink that statement, because there's always going to be something that you need to tweak. For example, you might want to change the VAT number, or the invoice comes in with a variance to the PO. But what we see with a lot of clients is probably 75% should be ready to go, and you can just automatically process those through. You're then just dealing with the 25–30%. In terms of training, in terms of your suppliers, yes, you do. You train your invoices. Again, nice and straightforward. You simply click, 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 click to train it. We can actually train, as you can see down here, where we can read the lines on a purchase invoice. Now, our biggest client at the moment, they're processing just over 15,000 purchase invoices a month. That's about to increase by another 5,000 with a department of 2.5 people. Sorry, one of them's part-time. It's not, yeah, you get the idea. But so 2.5 people are in there, but they wouldn't be able to do that without this level of automation. So again, we're training the lines, so it's actually matching the quantities against the invoice. And what we can see from here is, if I go to the validation, actually it's struggling. So it's going, so let me just revalidate them all a sec. There we go. Still going to have a bit of a problem. But the issue there is the receipt issue. So it's actually checked and it's gone, okay, we're happy that it's an Ernie Swinton invoice. We're happy that the account's not on hold. We're happy that the invoice number isn't a duplicate within the system. We're happy that the date is inside of our validation. We're happy that the net, VAT and total match. We're also happy that the purchase order exists in the system. We can see that where it originated from. We can see Sandra Markey. So if I need to contact Sandra for anything, we can see that it's live. But we've got some issues, and that's because we've not goods received the quantities. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to do that process now. Is I'm just going to goods receive this particular invoice. So let's just do that. So we'll select all, we'll receive all of those. Again, if you part receive, this is great because we're reading the lines. It's going to just match up the lines and say, yeah, we've received the right quantity, or hang on, the invoice is for an item, but we've only received 2 cups and they're trying to invoice us for 3, those sorts of things. Obviously for today's demo, I've kept things nice and smooth, hopefully. So I'm just going to goods receive those in. If you don't do 3-way matching, then don't worry about this step. It's just how my demo environment's configured. So if I now come back into the process here, let's refresh that. So I've still got one receipt issue there. Let me just revalidate it all. It's still needs a bit of attention. Now the issue there is, what's the issue down here? In terms of the kettle, no, it's happy with all those, but actually I've got a variance. So we can see there is a bit of a variance against what's on the PO and what's on the order. Now at this point, I could go through and tidy all those bits up. I'm actually not going to bother with that. If it was valid, I could turn on multi-select. I could select ones that I want to process, click on process automatically. I'm going to go through manual and talk you through and then how I can override those. Now, for those of you perhaps aren't using purchase orders, again, it might be an option for you, hopefully if you like what the requisition element is, but actually we've got a lot of clients just use purchase invoices. So again, on the system, that's absolutely fine. What it will do as a default is it will code it to the nominal against the supplier, but you can, if you want to, if I just undo that a second there, for purchase invoices, you can right mouse click on a document and you can process the document manually. If I just select that, what we do is we take you straight through to Sage's enter purchase invoice screen, but we give you the image on the right hand side. But of course, because we filled in all the details for you, it's just a case now of you doing your nominal analysis. So yes, there's a level of admin in there, but it's a lot less than what you've got. And of course, we're going to archive, as you'll see later, that document. We are working on ways of being able to read the description and then set some coding in the background. That's a project we're working on at the moment. Hopefully, we've got our very, very clever developers on it. But again, we're looking to try and sort of push and drive that. But for the moment, you would do that manually. In terms of this one here, I'm going to process the document through. So what we're doing when we process through automatically, it's going to go through all these steps that I'm showing you here, but it's telling me that actually there's a net variance, and I've not set any tolerance on there, so it's not happy. But I can force that through. So what it's basically saying is, there's our purchase invoice. There's all the details on there. We can see quantities to be invoiced. We can see the values. Do they match or do they not match in terms of that? I'm just going to accept and push that through. This is our pop-up that you can turn off, but it will show, it allows you to add any notes as well. I'm just going to carry that on. And then we get to the enter purchase invoice screen. So again, I'm stepping this through. If that had been fully validated, then we could just flow that through, not a problem. So, and the issues is I've got landed costs set up on one of the lines, and that's really where my issue with the variance was. Actually, no, I will leave that in there. 0.27, that's my variance line. So that should balance lovely. So what we're going to do, we're going to move across now to our invoice approvals module. Now, you don't have to take both. Some people might just take invoice approvals. Some might just do requisitions. There is an argument, well, if we've approved the expenditure, the invoice matches what we've approved and we've received, why on earth do I need to approve the invoice? Well, actually, you're right. So there is a setting where if everything matches, then what we can do is we can auto approve the invoice for you. We can set up a tolerance. So if it's inside 3%, £2 or whatever it is, then we can also say, well, okay, it's within the tolerances that the company sets, just auto approve that. But the idea with the invoice approvals module is capturing anything else. So capturing those purchase invoice that you post where there wasn't a PO, so we need to approve them, utility bills, for example, or capturing those that don't fall within either of the criteria that I spoke about. So what's actually happened now? So if I just refresh, our purchase order is completed. If I go to the purchase ledger, then and I look at Ernie Swinton and I look at the transaction inquiry, well, what we've got on here is our invoice. So there's our invoice. We can see the purchase order number, but it's actually sat in query. So at the moment, it's sat in an unauthorized purchases nominal. And whilst it's sat there, it will not appear on your suggested payments run. Now, this is quite key because, again, some customers say, well, no, I don't really want them on my Sage system. But actually, if you've got them in there, we've got a reversing journal for you so you can do your month-end accruals. But it gives you that visibility. You know it's on there. And if I look at the document count, that's where we can view the attachment that's against the document. But because I also emailed out my purchase order, it's pulled through the digital copy of that purchase order as well against that transaction. So for the auditors, you've got all the information you need. Now we actually use a standard Sage feature called unauthorized. I've got a balance sheet set up for this particular nominal. It can be a P&L if you wanted to. But basically what's happened is we've got separate approval routes, but it's a similar thing. If I just log out, Corey's my main approver. He receives an email, he logs in based on the approval routes. Click on the link there, and we should have, there it is there, purchase order 4180, and there's our invoice ready to be approved. Now, as I expand it, because I've used Sicon documents and we've attached the digital copy of the invoice, Corey can see the actual copy of the supplier's invoice there. Corey can see the lines on it, the various details. He can add notes. So if I know this is going to go to Hannah, I can add some notes in there. I mentioned budgets earlier. If I had budgets set up, then I can click on here. And for that particular nominal, if I just move that over, I can see month, year to date, the annual, the actual postings in the current financial year, anything sat in deferred, the value of any outstanding purchase order lines that are yet to be completed, any requisitions that have yet to be approved with that particular nominal, and also our invoices. So I can get a real-time view of those, the budget itself, even drill down from a read-only perspective and see those transactions. A couple of options that I have then at this stage. I can switch this off, but this is great if your budget holders are the people who will tell you what nominal. Well, actually, you just code it to a nominal that you know will go through to Hannah, give Hannah the edit button, and you can then give her a restricted list of nominals she can select from. She picks the nominal she wants it coded to, and when it's fully approved, it credits the unauthorized and debits whatever those finished nominals are. You can switch that off. I can approve or reject. If I reject, again, I have to give a reason why. I can hold the invoice as well. I'm just for time purposes today, just going to approve all. Again, similar rules as before. We can have multi-level, all those wonderful elements. But once that's been fully approved, just log out now. Again, emails will be bounced between. But if I just refresh, go to our transaction inquiry. Our flag's now been removed. And if I look, credit debit, and that's now ready to appear on the appropriate suggested payments route. In terms of suggested payments, there's also an option whereby we can send that out to be approved as well. And whilst it's in approval, you can't actually make the payment as well. So that appears even with the amend suggested payments function. So you can say, actually, I'm going to part pay that one, not pay that one as well. You get all of that with that invoice approvals module. Lots more that I could talk about, but just with the last 5 minutes before we open it up then to questions, I just want to touch on audit log. So audit log's a lovely little utility that you just install, go into settings, and then you choose which of the modules from this list here you want to audit. So standard Sage ones will be cash book, contract manager is ours. So if you've got Sicon contracts, The rest of them are all standard Sage. And you can see here, if I want to audit that module, then we just do the tick box. If I don't want to audit the module, then I just leave it unticked. But the secondary option here, what we've got is we've got the concept of silent tracking. So for my purchase ledger, I've got silent tracking switched off. For my sales ledger, I've got silent tracking switched on. So silent tracking means it's going to still track the details in the background, but the user doesn't know it's been tracked. What we'll see from the purchase ledger is they will know it's been tracked because they will get a pop-up. So what do I mean by all of this? Well, actually, if I come in and I amend, let's go for direct tile, that'll do, and I amend this particular account. Now, it is important I show you where you can find the fields. We don't track every single field. We track the ones which we think are important or have been pointed out to us by customers. If there are fields, you know, if you're interested in this, you have a look that it doesn't, then obviously speak with Hannah and the team, and we can look to potentially add that in. So if, for example, I want to increase the credit limit to 30,000, and I mentioned bank account details before, so let's just do 1-1-2-2-3, making a right hash of that, 3-3, there you go, and we'll go, that'll do for the moment. When I save these changes, because I've got silent tracking switched off, it's popping up and saying, well, why have you made these changes? So at this point, I can just say for a demo or whatever the reason I've made the changes, and I can click on save. It's not stopping those changes being made. Those changes are now in the system, and you'll see if I refresh now, the credit limit's changed. But I've given a bit of a rationale. And I often think with these audit logs, it's covering all parties. So what do I mean with that for the user? Well, I'm making changes every day. Could be a genuine mistake, but actually if it's popping up and I'm saying why I've made the changes, then that's covered. For others, actually just having it tracking in the background, you know, it's not a problem. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we look at our sales ledger, I'm going to make just the same change to a credit limit. So I just amend the account here, and I'll give them a credit limit. I won't give them that much. They obviously owe quite a lot. I've made that change. Yeah, it's just happened in the background. So that's the two options there. Now, in terms of reporting, there's a couple of different ways. So the first one is we do have a ledger sign off. Now, it's not signing off, and it's not an approval process. But what it's doing is showing me all of the changes that have been made since the last time I essentially cleared this list down. Now, what you'll notice in here is I can't see my own changes, and that's by design. I shouldn't be able to sign off and hide my own changes, but they will be, and I'll run a report in a moment. We should see those. But it means that other users, when they've made changes, I can check if I'm happy with those. I can select them all. And if I sign off, what it will then essentially put a stamp to say, yes, Steve Gemmett's seen these and he's happy with those changes. There's nothing untowards. But as I mentioned, everything is changed. So if I come into the audit log, changes just at the back here, and I'm just going to put the change date is today. Should actually, let me just select the module. Let's do it that way. Let's go purchase ledger. Just want to really show you the changes that we've got. So there's a standard report there. It's just going to go through all of the pages, all the changes from all time, and you can see there these are the changes. Now it's not Sarbanes or SOX compliant, but it's compatible. So what do I mean by that? Well, we know the supplier, we know the field that was changed, what it was changed from and to, those details, and we can see date it was changed. And down here you would see if it was signed off by somebody, and there's the reason. If it's silent tracking, it would just say silent tracking. So all of those changes are tracked. The last thing I just want to do is go back to the website, and then I'll open up for questions. Is from the audit log, feel free to visit the website. If you go to products and find, say, audit log there, you'll find the sales collateral. So have a look at that. But actually, if you go on the help and user guides, you don't have to register at all. So we're not tracking you, but these are designed for customers who've had training as a live help file. I really like this. I thought the directors were mad when I joined nearly 10 years ago. I come from an enterprise background where we keep everything hidden, but it's great that it's out there. So you can use Control F as it says there, or Command F if you're on a Mac like I am to be able to search for them. But if you come down to, for example, here, you can actually see there's an Excel spreadsheet of all of the fields that we track. So again, have a look at that. But likewise, if we go to settings, you'll see screenshots and descriptions. It's exactly the same for documents, document automation, and then approvals over here. So in terms of what we've gone through, I mean, it's literally is a snapshot. And what I would always recommend is if any of what we've covered today resonates with you and you think, oh, that's interesting, just speak with Hannah and the team and arrange a demonstration. Because of course, there's always going to be specifics for yourselves. But as you can see there, hopefully we're devolving that responsibility. We're reducing admin, but whilst maintaining control. And you saw a bit of the flow through today. So Hannah, I'm going to hand back over to you. I'm just going to bring up the presentation.
Steve.
I'm going to turn my camera back on, and hopefully, if we do that, I'll let you summarize.
Perfect. So thank you so much, Steve. Very informative demo there. So just to recap on some of the benefits, I know Steve did touch on them as he went through the demo. So it is a fully integrated solution. This will be able to minimize any unnecessary paperwork you have, therefore reducing your admin time. And obviously be more productive. It will streamline the processes while still maintaining that you have full control of the data. You have a better cost control throughout the requisition and invoice approval process. And you obviously have comfort knowing that key non-financial changes in Sage, they're all fully tracked for you. So I have a few questions that have come in, Steve.
Okay, perfect.
Excuse me, my hay fever is attacking me this morning. So first of all, that came in is where is the Sicon approvals actually hosted?
Yeah, I did allude to that near the start, but yeah, it's not hosted by us. So it's in whatever the environment. So if you have your Sage 200 platform on a server in-house, we would simply install it there. If you host it in your own private cloud, or again, if it's handled by yourselves, Hannah, it's wherever that is. So what's quite nice is it's your data. And I didn't go into the back end as an admin user, but yeah, again, you've got full control over if you wanted to add another Sage company, you can connect that yourself. Obviously, the help and user guides there. You know, we can support you with that. If you want to add users, mark them as leavers, etc., you're fully in control.
Perfect. I think you did briefly touch on this one, but obviously the questions came in throughout the demo. So this customer, they don't use purchase orders, but they're asking, can they still use the approvals and the documents?
Yes, they can. So there's actually a couple of options here. Certainly, we've got a lot of clients who just purely financials from a Sage perspective. They don't have the commercial side. Yeah, absolutely, it will work. You configure up your approval routes for the invoice approvals, you post through your purchase invoices, and then all of them would go through to the invoice approvals to then flow through. We do have, for those of you perhaps aren't interested in the automation side, you like the requisition, but you haven't got commercials, there is an option where you can use requisitions. Actually, the Sicon solution provides the PO. It all remains in the approvals platform, but you do your matching of your invoice in approvals before it posts through. So you can't use the document automation, but there is that option there. And there's something which we used to have in an older version of document automation, which we're bringing into the newer one. It's not there just yet. And that is, we've got some clients, you know, I alluded to earlier, where we post the invoice and it sits as the unauthorized before it flows through to approvals. We've actually got some clients where they don't want that. You know, that's their choice. So there is a setting which we're going to be bringing back where we can process through the automation, but it will send it to approvals before it then posts anything to Sage. So we're trying to cover a number of different options. Again, there's pros and cons in all of it, but that's why I'd recommend just having that one-to-one discussion.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Steve. I have another question come in here. So it's what does the audit trail for approvals look like? So this particular customer needs to be able to show a clear audit trail for their auditors, showing the approval date, the amount the amount in euro value, supplier name, name of approver, invoice number. So obviously, how would all of that information look for the audit trail for approvals?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I go back in, yeah, actually I'll log in as the admin user. See if I can find one previously there. So let's go show existing. So I'm just logging in as my top level approver. So if I just let's edit that one. In terms of the audit history, so there's a couple of different audit elements. So in terms of this, on the requisition, what you can see there is that was modified. It was modified from not approved to approved. The PO number went from no PO number to that date. What was generated, the users, sorry, I can't see that just behind the who updated it and the date and time. As we scroll down, again there we can see where it went to fully authorized, and again the date and time. You would see things on there if they deleted the line or if they modify the line as well, you'll see the same information, but that's very much what that audit trail shows. But there is also the sort of more simplified approval history as well. And what's quite nice, if I find an invoice approvals one, just to show you what that looks like. Again, if I just edit that, and we just look at the approval history there, is actually we can see as it's flown through, which you can see there, restarted the approval route when it was fully approved. But you can also see here, if you look at Steve, it will show you which Sage 200 user processed the invoice in Sage and sent it out. And again, you've got the audit history there. We can see what the original nominal, what we modified that nominal to. So that will have been that edit setting. So we can see what they changed it through, who updated it, and the date and time stamp as well. Perfect. So hopefully that covers all of those elements. But yeah, all of that's held in the system for you.
Perfect. That's brilliant. There's one more question here. So this customer looked at documents before, but they're worried with the amount of storage that they need. So do any customers have any issues with storage?
It's always a
case by case.
Yeah, it is all kind of case by case. It's always a bit of a difficult one on the one hand, because it depends on the size of storage on your server. Now what we do is we store the documents in the Sage documents folder on your server with a link in the database. So what it means then is you can do things like you can find the transaction, even down to, we've got tools like do a document search within Sage itself. So if I just, for example, if I just come down here and I say it's a purchase invoice I'm looking for, so I will answer the specific question in just a second, but
no, don't worry.
ERN 001, it means that finding all of those documents it's searching the database, but then pulling back the document from the server. So the benefit of having all of that is all backed up as well. But yes, it does depend. Now, there's a couple of answers to this. First one is, I mean, hard drive space this day and age is pretty cheap in the grand scheme of things. So, you know, adding and increasing that space shouldn't be too difficult. But the reason for coming into here is if we scroll down and I have a quick look there, you can see that particular PDF is 28 kilobytes. So actually, so long as, because we're using PDFs typically for this, or it might be JPEGs, perhaps if you've taken a scan and you've manually attached it, the document should be quite small. It's only going to be, you know, if you were attaching MP3s or sort of 4K videos where it's going to take up a lot of size. But actually, certainly in our experience, it's not really an issue. And I mentioned we've got one client processing 15,000 per month. You know, just for them, it's just a case of, you know, if they start getting close to the end of it, well, then, you know, it's moving it to a new server where there's more space, or if it's hosted in Azure or that sort of environment to increase the storage space this day and age is fairly straightforward. So it doesn't become so much of an issue as it used to. But absolutely, I do. You know, it is on a case-by-case basis. And if you are concerned, it's, again, one option is just to look at the type of PDFs you've got, look at the file size, do a bit of maths, and you kind of probably realise that if they're all about 28 kilobytes, I'm going to need tens and tens, hundreds and hundreds of thousands to even sort of scratch the surface.
Perfect. I can't see any more questions in the box there. Obviously, if anyone does have any questions, because we all know they kind of come to you after the after the fact,
Yes.
you can pop me over an email. So sales@envisagecloud.ie. Oh, I think one last
Oh,
one might have just popped in there. Yeah, just one last one there. So
okay.
does the approval audit trail / the record from the approval portal get pulled into Sage 200? So does the audit trail is there too?
No, it doesn't. So in terms of that, any of the audit trail within approvals maintains in approvals. It makes sense because that's where all the sort of the record, the attachments would be. So, but that's why we put on the purchase order. You've got the link. Obviously, you know what the so if the order just came in and they said, well, we want to see the trail. What you can actually do is if you've raised a requisition, that flows through to Sage, you match the invoice, that flows back out. You can, from the invoice, draw back down to the original requisition. So all you need to know is if you know the invoice number, you search for that in approvals, you find that. They can then look at the audit trail. They could then jump back through to the requisition and they could see the start of the trail. So we keep all of that
Perfect.
in approvals.
Perfect. That's brilliant. Thanks a mil, Steve, and thanks for
Yeah,
your
more than
time
welcome.
this morning. Thanks to everyone else who took the time out this morning to attend, or thanks as well, I suppose, who's tuning in at a later time with the recording. So the details are on screen there. Sales@envisagecloud.ie. Feel free to send me over an email. You can give the office a call, 822-3200. That should be that number there. And just ask for myself. And of course, if you want any more information, we can send it over. If you're interested in anything Steve's discussing, you want to have a more kind of in-depth tailored demo to yourself, we can of course arrange that. So yeah, I suppose we will end it here and thanks everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.